Yo, what is up, you guys? So in today's video, we're going to talk about some basic progressions, and the point of that is to kind of show you the most basic building blocks of progressions and kind of start to give you ideas on how you can make them different or your own. So we're going to start with one really simple one, so a basic eighth note type progression that you hear in a lot of pop music. And that's just because it's very easy to build on top of that, because the simpler you keep stuff, the more you can make it more interesting by adding more elements, which is an easy thing to do in pop music. The second one is a short and sweet complex one, meaning that the rhythm is kind of all over the place, but it has some nice standing out notes. And then the last one is kind of a more progressive type of progression that holds out longer and is a little bit nicer to kind of chill to. So let's just get started with those. Alright, so let's get into the first one. So let's start off with a really basic progression. Alright, so very simple. And you notice that this goes really well with the typical 4-to-floor beat. So just with a kick on every beat of the bar, and just it plays really well. The two go hand in hand. The pattern is simple, and it's very easy to add bass lines underneath this, add melodies on top of this, put a vocal right over it, because this is really what this progression is good at doing, other than being really simple, is sitting in the back. It's just like if the track requires a big vocal and a big pad and a big whatever, then a progression like this is probably a better idea, something that's simpler, so it's kind of more chilled and not trying to grab your attention. You don't want to make everything as loud and as attention grabbing as possible. Just one great element of that with supporting elements really is a lot better. So whereas the eighth note progression is really simple, now we are into a much shorter but sweet type of progression. So this is kind of more complex, but it's only 2 bars. The eighth note progression one was only 4 bars, but this one is 2 bars because this is meant to be played over and over. It's easier to listen to if it's looped. You won't get sick of listening to it. So that's a good way to test things in general. If you can listen to it on a loop and without being bored or annoyed by it, then it might work pretty well for you. When we play this, these 2 notes right here are going to pop out a little bit more because they're shorter notes and they're being triggered differently than the longer notes. And you can also use the same thing with velocity. So if you want to make something pop out, lower the velocity of everything else and heighten the velocity of what you want to pop out. And that's called accenting. So sometimes accenting a note is a really smart way to make a simple point seem very loud. So just making one note slightly louder in velocity can translate and make beautiful music. So what else? In this one you can see that the rhythm is obviously very different from an eighth note progression where everything is just very consistent and straightforward. This is like the rhythm of this is kind of has its own feeling, and there's rest in between so that there's space for it to breathe when it seems like it's too much. So let's play this one because it's probably a lot easier for you to get what I'm saying if I just play it. So just keep in mind that some notes are going to stand out. They're going to be accented, and that's done very deliberately through the MIDI. So you could hear how some notes really just stood out. There were just like some notes were like da 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 da. It's very like good when you can imagine yourself kind of mimicking it with your mouth, so kind of just humming it along. If you can kind of follow it like that, then that's a good sign of you got something that's nice and catchy. Alright, so with this one, this is kind of more progressive, kind of very genre-specific type progression. The notes are obviously longer, sustaining, and then there's short notes that kind of come in between to kind of spice it up before we go into another long sustaining note. And of course I'm using more rest in between. In certain parts you can see I'm not holding this out all the way to the beginning of the next note, basically. But for the most part, most of these notes are sustaining in a very legato way until the next note. So if we look at the first two bars, we notice that these chords have three notes in them. So there's one note here, 2, 3. So there's three notes in a chord. And in the second half of this progression, all the chords have four notes. So we've added another harmonic to the second half chords. So if we just mute this out and then we play the progression, we're going to notice how much more different that is in not a so good way. Big difference. So you can see that just by adding an extra harmonic, we went from something that we showed as being simple and then we made it more complex. And even by having a different rhythm in the last two bars is a nice way of saying, hey, you think you know the piece of music you're listening to, but now you're listening to something that is more complex. So I think that's all I wanted to talk about. Those are my tips for you guys. 3 different styles of progressions. We looked at it so we could analyze the difference and see the different types and see the things that makes them special, so that way you can apply that to what you do. So that's everything I want to show you guys. Let me know if you want me to do more videos focusing on this type of stuff. Maybe in the next video I could focus more on melodies instead of progressions. So you guys let me know, and thanks guys for watching, and of course, Lates.